there, Jonathan here, and welcome to Learn to Playthrough, and welcome to my workstation. Today we're going to be finishing the painting process with the painting of the Targa Pylons. Where I'll be applying their first colors, the base coats, detailing and highlighting if needed, a wash to add some more depth and realism, a basing to give a feel of the surroundings, and then finishing off with a varnish to help protect. Now, during this painting process, think of it more as painting tips and tricks than actual painting. For the painting, this is geared towards someone who has picked up a paintbrush at least once. So I'll be painting any miniatures off camera and then returning to discuss the step-by-step of the painting I just did. This way, you'll know what you're about to get into. But if you really need to see someone paint these Targa Pylons from the enemy pack, Custodians of Targa with Targa Pylons, at the moment, I'm sorry to say that I could not find any videos of anyone painting these Targa Pylons. As for the tips and tricks, these are geared towards all levels of painters, as you can never stop learning. So with that, just go ahead and sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now before we begin the painting process, here's a question for you. How old are your items in your toolbox? Some of you might like using that umpteen-year-old paintbrush, and now don't get me wrong, if it still works and you love it, then by all means keep using it. But more like, is this poster tack fresh enough to hold on to the miniature that's on the end of this dowel? And if you start flinging that dowel around, is that miniature going to go flying off? And also, how long since you opened that special color? Now, last year, I had an issue with some paint drying out. The Shadow Black from the Shadows of Brimstone Heroes of the Old West paint set. But luckily, I had bought the Army Painter Mega paint set, which had some black in there. So I was able to continue on with my painting instead of having to order some new paint and wait for it to be delivered. So in the end, know your items in your toolbox so your paints and items will be nice to you. Well, that should do it for now. I got plenty more miniatures to paint, so plenty of tips coming your way. So today in the painting process is the Targa Pylons. After analyzing the Targa Pylons, I'll be painting the Targa Pylons in 3 steps. Since there is no painting guide that I can use as a reference for what the Targa Pylons look like or what colors to use, I have found several pictures to use as a reference, including the enemy record sheet. For the paints, I'm going to be using some that came with the Shadows of Brimstone Heroes of the Old West paint set. And these can be identified by the lawman on the front of the bottle. Also some that came from the Shadows of Brimstone Creatures of the Void paint set. And these can be identified by the Hellbat on the front of the bottle. And then some that I found in the Army Painter Mega paint set. And these can be identified by the color-filled hexagon on the front of the bottle. So now that we're ready to go, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 1. Now in step 1, we're going to be applying those first colors, the base coats. Now there's only 2 areas that we're going to be dealing with. We've got the Targa Pylon and then the base rim. For the Targa Pylon, I'm going to be using uniform gray. Now this is kind of interesting because the paint that I'm using, uniform gray, is the same color that I primed the miniature with. See, uniform gray. Now that's going to be good and bad. Good because it's going to be the same color, and if by chance you didn't paint good enough with the uniform gray paint, then the primer is going to end up bleeding through. But in this case, they're both the same color, so it's not really going to make that big of a difference. Well, you would think at least. So that way, you don't have to go ahead and repaint, and you can save a lot of time and get a lot more miniatures out. Now the bad thing is that you're going to end up having primer exposed because you're not covering it with the base color, but you figure whether it's a base color or a detailing or any other kind of colors, you are putting paint on top of the primer, so I guess it would be okay. For the base rim, I'm going to go ahead and use matte black, and then with that I'm going to go ahead and just paint the rim, but I'll paint a little bit more on top and not cover a lot of the top of the base, because when I go ahead and do basing, I'm going to see if the gray will bleed up through the rocks, that I can see the gray through the rocks when I do the basing on it. Okay, so with all that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and start painting our base coats with step 1. Hello there, and welcome back as we just finished up our step 1 of applying those first colors, the base coats, to our Targa Pylons. And overall I'm fairly happy with the results here. I did have a concern with painting the Targa Pylon that uniform gray, and then the primer that we used was a uniform gray also. Because as you can see here on the Army Painter Mega Paint set, it says that it's a 100% color match. So I was kind of concerned of putting that paint on there and not knowing whether or not I painted over the primer. But I could see that there were several areas when I did apply the paint that it kind of like left streaks, and then the primer was able to bleed up through it. So I went ahead and dealt with that situation because I knew it was there, and everything turned out pretty good. Now the Targa Pylon is a kind of a tall, good-sized model, so definitely be aware with what kind of paintbrushes you use. Now normally I use this paintbrush, which is the base coating paintbrush, and this time I used a round paintbrush, and the round paintbrush is about 2 to 2.5 sizes larger. And so with that, that's going to give you the ability to paint a lot more surface area. Now, just because you want to get your painting done, don't think that you're going to go ahead and grab a paintbrush like this and just slop the paint on. Okay, because you have to worry about other things like details. So you don't want to put too much paint on because you might kill the details of the miniature, and then that's going to be a big issue. Alright, well, now that the base coats are applied, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 2. So for step 2, we'll be doing some touch-ups, detailing, highlighting, and adding a wash. So for the entire model, we'll be doing some touch-ups when we get to that point, because the base rim here, the black, close to the Targa Pylon, is actually far enough away that I didn't really have an issue with it, so there really isn't going to be any kind of touch-ups needed there. I'll have some touch-ups later on to deal with. For the detailing, on each side of the Targa Pylon there are 2 triangles to deal with, and I'm going to go ahead and paint those loot gold. And then on the front and the back side, just above the laser eye, there's some symbols there. And I'm going to go ahead and paint those loot gold also, so I can go ahead and give the Targa Pylons a little bit of a bling. And then I'm going to go ahead and use Spirit White for some highlighting. And I'm going to apply it mostly to the edges of the Targa Pylon and give it kind of a weathered look, since it is out there in the middle of the Targa Plateau and the wind and the ice and the snow hitting it. And then once everything is good there, I'm going to go ahead and apply a wash. Now there's 2 techniques that I'm going to do. The first one is called an OSL, which is an object source lighting. And I'm going to do that to the laser eye on both sides. And what the OSL is going to do is it's going to give the effect that the laser eye is actually glowing and emitting off the light to the outer areas that it's nearby. And for the OSL, I'm going to use some spirit white, cinder yellow, and lava orange. And then once that OSL wash technique is down, I'm going to go ahead and put a dark tone ink wash all over the miniature, and I'm going to apply it over the OSL area, just not as much because I want the OSL look to come out. Okay, well, so with all that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and continue on with step 2. Hello there, and welcome back, as we just finished up step 2 with our touch-ups, detailing, highlighting, and a wash to our Targa Pylons. Step 2 finished up fairly quickly and smoothly, and overall I'm very happy with the results. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Targa Pylons to see what we did. First up are the touch-ups, and there was only 2 areas that I had to deal with, the Targa Pylons and the base. And with the base, I just kept the black far enough back away from the Targa Pylon so I didn't really have to worry about doing any kind of touch-ups. Now there's a couple areas later on that I did some touch-ups, and we'll go ahead and talk about that when I get to it. Next one, I did some detailing. So on the side of the Targa Pylons, there's 2 triangles on each side that I went ahead and painted some loot gold. And then on the front side and the back side, there's the symbols, and I went ahead and painted those loot gold. And I used the toothpick trick to go ahead and just dab the paint into those symbols, but the paint did eventually go up and over onto the face of the Targa Pylon, and this is where I ended up doing the touch-ups by just getting that uniform gray and going back over it and getting rid of that loot gold. So definitely figure out when you're painting whether you're going to paint this area first and then that area, or this area first and then that area, because sometimes the painting of them is a little bit easier a certain way. And after the detailing, I went ahead and grabbed the spirit white and used a dry brush technique to go ahead and do all the areas except for the laser eye and the column area here on the bottom of the Targa Pylon. So it's giving that weathered look. So looking pretty good there. And when I was all done with that and ready to continue on, I went ahead and started the wash section. And we have 2 different areas. One, I'm doing the laser eye, and then second, I'm doing a wash to the whole Targa Pylon itself. So for the wash on the laser eye, I'm going to be doing a technique called OSL, which is Object Source Lighting. And I go ahead and just leave the eye as it is. And then I go ahead and give it a nice white paint job. And with that, that's going to depict the intensity of the light source. And then we need a color, so I went ahead and chose yellow. Now earlier I did say that I was going to use some lava orange for the laser eye, but I've decided just to stick with just yellow, as it's not really a torch that's going to emit several different colors where you have yellow, red, orange, and stuff like that. This is just a laser eye that it was a big yellow light bulb and it just shoots out a laser, so I'm just going to use the yellow color. Now I took the cinder yellow and I put 1 part cinder yellow to 2 parts of water to make my own little contrast paint, and I applied 2 coats to there, and about 20% of the white is showing out from the laser eye. And then I took the rest of that contrast paint and then I went ahead and painted off the face of the Targa Pylon directional out from the laser eye, and then also applied a lot more paint in those little dugout column areas that go up and down and left and right from the laser eye. So as you can see here, we got a little diagonal shot of the OSL technique, and there's several rules that you should be aware of when doing a technique like this. And one is that lit areas are always brighter than the others. So in this case, the laser eye itself is the source of the light, so that's going to be the brightest, and then anything else that's off of it, it's going to be a little bit less in intensity. Which is rule 2, lit areas lose brightness over distance. So as you can see from the laser eye where it's nice and bright, as it goes off towards the edge of the face, it gets less and less in color. So the intensity of the color drops. Then we go to number 3. The end color is a mix between the color of the object and the light source. So as you can see, the source of light from the laser eye to the edge, it's less in color, and you can actually see underneath that yellow to see the gray and the white from the highlighting of the Targa Pylon. And finally, number 4 is light moves in straight lines. So as you can see here on the face of the Targa Pylon with the laser eye, that's where the yellow is at, but coming off to the left with the face of those 2 triangles, there is no light because light cannot bend around corners. It just goes in a straight fashion. So you can see here by looking sideways at it, you can see on the right and left side that the eye of the laser eye is extended out past the face of the Targa Pylon, so that's going to give the fact that it's able to let the light source go down onto the face of the Targa Pylon. And when I was done with the OSL technique, I went ahead and did a wash of the entire Targa Pylon using the dark tone ink, so that now it looks a little bit more rougher up and looks more like rock. And so with that, everything's looking pretty good. Well, that's going to do it for step 2, and with our final step remaining, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 3. Now for step 3, we're going to be doing the basing and protecting of the miniature. For the basing, I'm going to put gravel on the base, and it's going to be the same gravel that I use on the Hero's base, which is a medium base, but this Targa Pylon is actually a large miniature. And so with that, I'm going to take that gravel and kind of break it down a little bit so it looks like the pieces are smaller and smaller. And I'm going to use a psychological effect here to where by looking at the gravel and it being smaller, it then psychologically says that the miniature is a larger miniature, larger than the Heroes. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some rocks in there, maybe pile them up in there or just a couple here and there. I'm not going to use any kind of vegetation, so no grass of what sort, because I figure the Targa Pylons are located on the Targa Plateau, which is a very cold and windy and snowy area that no vegetation is going to grow. And then finally I got a special project, and I'm going to put snow on the Targa Pylon. So I'm going to go ahead and build up some snow, putting them most on the horizontal areas, nothing really on the vertical, even though some snow I've seen actually sticks on vertical areas. And then maybe like in these little alcove areas, pile up some snow in there to make some kind of a just a piled up snow. And then after that, I'm going to go ahead and protect the miniature with a spray-on varnish using the Tester's spray lacquer that I have, matte varnish to dull down the miniature. And after that, everything should be good to go. So with all that information, spraying other items ready to go, let's go ahead and finish our miniatures with step 3. Hello there, and welcome back as we just finished up step 3 with our basing and protecting of our Targa Pylons. Step 3 finished up a bit slow as I came into the step with a bit of nervousness to whether or not I could pull off the snow effect. But oh my god, it looks so good. I was very impressed with the outcome here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Targa Pylons to see what we did. For the basing, I started out by finding small rocks and placing them around the base of the Targa Pylon. Now the base is a 30 millimeter base, so there's really not much room to work with, and definitely a 40 millimeter base would be a lot better. So then when I was happy with what I found for small rocks, I went ahead and put some glue on the base and then put the rocks into the glue and moved them around until I was happy with the way they looked. And then I took some super glue and put it on the remaining areas of the base, and I'll go ahead and put some gravel into the glue. I went ahead and used the gravel I used for the 30 millimeter base on the Heroes, and then I went ahead and crushed it up a little bit, and then I also added some of this sand to it from Cinerama. And I did a 4:3 ratio where I took 4 parts of the crushed gravel and I added 3 parts of the sand, and I mixed it up. I then took the Targa Pylon and put it in this container, and then I just took that mixture of gravel and sand and just put it onto the glue that was on the base, and then I took my X-Acto knife and I took the end of it and I tapped the gravel mixture into the glue a little bit deeper. That way the gravel mixture is into the glue instead of just laying on top, and that way it'll have a little bit harder time to be falling off. And when I was happy with the amount of gravel on there, I went and just did a little tap to get the excess off. And then you might end up having some pieces just hanging over the edge. So I went ahead and just rubbed my thumb along the rim of the base, and that knocked off anything else that was just laying about. And there we have a nice Targa Pylon. Now, it would be all nice and dandy right now if the Targa Pylon was anywhere else except for the Targa Plateau. And the Targa Plateau is cold and windy, and it's got snow and ice flying all over the place, so we definitely have to add some snow. So I went ahead and got these 3 materials. I got the Elmer's white glue, and then get yourself some white paint. I'm using the Spirit White. And then I got the snow material. And the snow material I'm using is from Cinerama, and I got this batch at Hobby Lobby. And if you want to find any of the other Cinerama products, and if they're not at Hobby Lobby, then you can head on over to the Woodland Scenics website where I got my other Cinerama items. Go ahead and leave the information for the Woodland Scenics location down in the show notes. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and put some of the Elmer's glue down onto the lid here, and then I put some of the white paint onto the glue, and then off to the side I went ahead and put some of that snow material, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to mix the glue and the paint together till it's 100% complete, and then go ahead and fold in the snow material. Now what these 3 items do is that the Elmer's glue, first of all, it's the glue, so it's going to hold everything onto the base or the Targa Pylon. The white paint, what that's going to do is it's going to keep the snow a white color longer as glue over time turns yellow. So in that case, you're going to end up having yellow snow. And we all know what yellow snow is, so we don't want to deal with that. And then the snow material, when you put it into the mixture, it's going to thicken it up. And so as you can see here, that this is the goop that it turns into. And it's kind of like a slight runny cottage cheese look to it. Now if you get yourself some thick cottage cheese looking to it, then it's too thick and you're going to have to thin it out a little bit. And when you go ahead and apply it, I used a dry brush because the brush is short and it's kind of firm, so you'd be able to scoop it out and place it into the places that you want to put it, and you don't have to worry about those flimsy brushes not pushing it into place. Now when you do place it onto the Targa Pylon, you want to go with just little sections here and there. So do a section here, section there, and then what you're going to do is after you put the goop mixture onto the Targa Pylon or on the base, then you're going to grab some of that snow material and you're going to let it just drop down onto that goop. And what it's going to end up looking like, it's going to look like a fresh fallen snow where it's nice and fluffy looking and you can see the crystals of the snowflakes and it looks really nice. So then you're going to go ahead and do another section and then do another section and do another section. So you don't want to take that goop and put it all over your Targa Pylon, because by the time you get back to the beginning it might be dried out a little bit too much that you wouldn't be able to put that snow material on it to make it look nice. So once you got all that on there, you got yourself a nice snow-covered Targa Pylon. Alright, so when you're all happy with that, then I went ahead and got my tester's spray lacquer to protect the miniatures and sprayed that on there so it dulls it down a little bit. And there you have it, our Targa Pylons. All the way from assembly to primed, step 1, step 2, and finally step 3. Well, that should do it. That is going to complete the painting of the Targa Pylons. Now that our enemies are all in color and ready to go, let's go ahead and get our enemies back down to the gaming table for some more action.